The Black Death, a day in the life of a Mongol.
The Black Death, also known as the bubonic plague, was a deadly pandemic that ravaged Europe and Asia in the mid 14th century. Believed to have originated in the Gobi Desert in Central Asia, the Black Plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. This bacterium is primarily transmitted by fleas that infest rats, but it can also be transmitted from person to person through respiratory droplets. This caused urban environments to become perfect areas for the disease to flourish.
Arriving in China in the mid 14th century during the rule of the Mongol Empire, it is estimated that the pandemic killed up to 25 million people in China alone, roughly a third of the country's population at the time.
The disease spread quickly through the trade routes that connected China to the other parts of Asia, as well as to Europe and Africa. The city of Kaffa, now known as Fedosia, in this Crimea, a major center of trade between Europe and Asia, was one of the first places in Europe to be hit by the Black Death, which had been brought there by Mongol armies besieging the city in 1346.
Nomadic Mongols led a lifestyle that was largely centered around their herds of livestock. They were pastoralists, moving with their animals to find grazing land and water sources throughout the year. The average day for a nomadic Mongol would vary depending on the season, weather, and other factors, but there were some general aspects that were typical of their daily life.
During the day, the nomadic Mongols would also engage in various forms of hunting and gathering. In the evening, families would gather around a fire, sharing meals and stories. Mongols would commonly take part in strong traditions such as oral storytelling, with tales passed down from generation to generation as a form of entertainment.
When it was time to move to a new location, the nomadic communities would pack up their belongings and animals and travel to the next spot. This often involved long journeys, which sometimes lasted for several days or even weeks.
Overall, the daily life of nomadic Mongols was focused on survival and self sufficiency, with a strong sense of community and shared traditions. Their lifestyle was challenging and required a deep knowledge of the natural world, but it also allowed for a unique sense of freedom and independence.
But how did the lifestyle react to the rapidly spreading virus? One of the key advantages that the Mongols had was their nomadic lifestyles. Because they moved around frequently, they did not settle in one place for an extended period of time. They were less likely to come in contact with the infected individuals or areas. Additionally, the Mongols had a vast network of trade routes that allowed them to quickly and easily move goods and people across the vast distances without a need for close contact with any others.
Despite these advantages, the Mongols were not immune to the bubonic plague. Some Mongols may have contracted the disease while traveling or coming into contact with infected individuals, and there are reports of significant outbreaks in Mongol encampments.
Overall, the life of a Mongol during the plague in China would have been one of constant movement and caution. They would have been aware of the risks of coming into contact with infected individual or areas and would have taken steps to avoid those risks as much as possible. Despite their advantages in terms of mobility, the Mongols were still vulnerable to disease and would have suffered losses like other communities during the outbreak.